The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering that had always made my heart flutter as a child. But this time, my name wasn't anywhere on it. Not in the elegant script across the front. Not in the RSVP details. Nowhere. I held it with trembling fingers, reading it 3 times before the reality sank in. My parents' annual fundraising gala, the event I'd helped plan since I was 12 years old, would happen without me. I called my mother immediately. My voice, catching as I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Mom, I think there was a mistake with the invitation. My name isn't... There's no mistake, sweetheart." Her voice was gentle but firm, the way she used to sound when she told me I couldn't have dessert before dinner. "We decided not to invite you this year." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in the kitchen where we'd planned so many of these galas together, her fingers probably worrying the pearl necklace she always wore when she was uncomfortable. But why? The question came out smaller than I intended, like the voice of the little girl who used to ask why I couldn't stay up past bedtime. "It's complicated, honey. Family image and all that. You understand." But I didn't understand. I understood that I'd been divorced for 2 years now, that my ex-husband had left me for his secretary, in a cliché so painful it still made me wince. I understood that I'd moved into a small apartment across town and taken a job at a non-profit that paid half what I used to make. But I didn't understand how any of that erased 28 years of being their daughter. Before we continue, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from and what time is it there? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. Sometimes the hardest truths find us when we least expect them. And I wonder if this moment is finding you in your own quiet hour of reflection. My father's voice joined the conversation then, that authoritative tone that had always ended discussions rather than encouraged them. "It's for the best, Catherine. You'll see. For the best." As if being erased from my own family's most important night could somehow benefit me. As if 28 years of helping arrange flowers and greet guests and count donations meant nothing when weighed against their concern for what the country club crowd might whisper. I hung up without saying goodbye, something I'd never done before. The invitation lay on my kitchen counter like evidence of a crime I didn't know I'd committed. The annual Harrison Family Foundation Gala, it read, to benefit children's literacy programs in our community. The same cause I'd been passionate about. Since college, the same mission that had driven me to volunteer at the library every weekend, even when my marriage was falling apart. That afternoon, I drove to my childhood home. The gardeners were already preparing the grounds, stringing lights through the oak trees that had watched me grow up. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway, watching strangers transform my sanctuary into something that would soon exclude. Mrs. Rodriguez, our housekeeper since I was 10, noticed me and walked over. Her face creased with concern when she saw my red eyes. "Mija, what's wrong? Did you know they weren't inviting me to the gala?" Her silence was answer enough. She reached through my car window and squeezed my hand, her calloused fingers warm against mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wanted to tell you, but it's okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. I texted my sister Sarah that evening, hoping for solidarity, for someone to tell me this was all a misunderstanding. Her response came 3 hours later. "Maybe it's better this way. Less complicated. Less complicated." My family had reduced me to a complication. A problem to be managed, rather than a person to be loved. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of hurt and disbelief. I'd wake up each morning thinking maybe I'd dreamed it all, that surely my parents would call and apologize, explain that there had been some terrible mistake. But my phone stayed silent. I found myself driving past the house more often than I should have, watching the preparations unfold. Caterers came and went. A florist arrived with arrangements so elaborate they needed their own truck. The rental company delivered round tables and Chiavari chairs, the same gold ones we'd used for the past 5 years. Everything was exactly as it had always been, except for me. I remembered being 16 and helping my mother address invitations, by hand, her careful cursive flowing across envelope after envelope. She'd trusted me with the guest list, the seating arrangements, the dietary restrictions. I'd been her right hand, her confidant in all things gala-related. "You have such a good eye for these things," she used to say. "When you get married, your wedding will be absolutely perfect." My wedding had been perfect, in this same backyard, under these same oak trees. Sarah had been my maid of honor. My parents had danced to their wedding song, and everyone had talked about what a beautiful family we were. That was only 4 years ago, but it felt like a lifetime. Now I was the family secret, the daughter who'd failed at marriage and needed to be hidden away when important people came to call. I started spending my evenings at the public library, the one that would benefit from the gala's proceeds. I'd sit in the children's section, surrounded by the bright colors and innocent laughter that I'd always associated with hope. The head librarian, Mrs. Chen, recognized me from my volunteer work. "Will we see you at the gala this year?" she asked, one evening as I was leaving. The question hit me like a physical blow. I won't be able to make it." She looked surprised. "Oh, that's too bad. Your parents always speak so highly of your involvement. They say you're the real driving force behind their commitment to literacy programs." I managed a smile and escaped to my car before the tears could fall. Even now, even after cutting me out, they were still using my passion, my work, my dedication to enhance their own image. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling and thinking about all the years I'd poured my heart into that gala. The late night stuffing envelopes, the phone calls to potential sponsors, the careful coordination of every detail to ensure the evening would be magical and meaningful. I thought about the first time I'd suggested adding a silent auction for children's books, how excited my parents had been about the idea, how proud they'd looked when that auction raised $15,000, how my father had introduced me to the major donors as the real brains behind this operation. But apparently, being the brains wasn't enough when your personal life didn't meet their standards. I started researching then, sitting at my laptop in the dark. I looked up every major donor from previous years, every sponsor, every vendor we'd worked with. I studied the foundation's financial reports, memorized the statistics about childhood literacy in our community, learned the names of every program our fundraising had supported. If my parents thought I was a liability to their precious image, I'd show them what I could accomplish entirely on my own. The idea came to me slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape I'd never seen before. I couldn't attend their gala, but nothing was stopping me from supporting the cause in my own way. Nothing was preventing me from reaching out to donors myself, from organizing my own fundraising effort. Nothing except the fear that I wasn't enough without my family name, without my parents' connections, without the safety net of belonging that I'd taken for granted my entire life. But maybe it was time to find out who Catherine Harrison really was when she stood completely alone. I made my first call the next morning to David Chen, Mrs. Chen's husband, who owned a small chain of bookstores. We'd met several times at previous galas, and he'd always been warm and encouraging about my ideas for expanding literacy programs. "Catherine," his voice was genuinely pleased to hear from me. "Are you calling about the gala? Patricia was just saying how much she's looking forward to it." "Actually, I'm calling about something else. I'm organizing an independent fundraising effort to support the same literacy programs, and I wondered if you might be interested in contributing." There was a pause. "Independent? Not through your parents' foundation?" "No. This would be directly to the library system and the schools. 100% of donations going straight to the programs." Another pause, longer this time. I held my breath, waiting for him to politely decline, to say he preferred to work through established channels, to hang up and call my parents to report my strange behavior. Instead, he said, "Tell me more." Over the next hour, I laid out my vision. Small businesses partnering with individual donors to create a grassroots fundraising network. No overhead costs, no administrative fees, no fancy galas with expensive catering. Just people who cared about children's literacy putting their money directly where it could make a difference. I love it, David said finally. Patricia's been saying for years that these big charity events spend too much on themselves and not enough on the actual cause. How much are you hoping to raise? I'd been thinking $5,000 would be ambitious. Instead, I heard myself say, 25,000. The number hung in the air like a challenge I'd thrown down to myself. Count us in for 1,000, David said without hesitation. And I'll put you in touch with some other business owners who might be interested. I hung up the phone with shaking hands and immediately called 3 more people. By the end of the day, I had commitments for $8,000 and a list of 15 more potential donors to contact. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a legal pad covered in names and numbers, feeling more energized than I had in months. This wasn't about proving anything to my parents anymore. This was about proving something to myself. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into fundraising with an intensity that surprised me. I researched grant opportunities, reached out to former colleagues, connected with other nonprofits to learn their strategies. I created a simple website explaining the initiative and set up a donation platform. I called it Books for Tomorrow and described it as a community-driven effort to put books directly into the hands of children who needed them most. No mention of my family, no reference to the gala, no explanation of why I was doing this on my own. The response was overwhelming. Teachers began sharing the website with parents. Local business owners who'd never heard of the Harrison family. Foundations started making donations. A retired librarian I'd never met sent a check for $500 with a note that said, "Thank you for caring about what really matters." By the 3rd week, I'd raised $18,000. More. Importantly, I'd discovered something about myself that I'd never known. I was good at this. Really good. Without my parents' name opening doors, without their connections smoothing the way, I was building something meaningful entirely from my own effort and passion. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. If I could do this, if I could create something this successful on my own, what did that say about all the years I'd spent in my parents' shadow? What did it say about the person I'd been before, the one who'd always waited for permission, who'd always sought approval before taking action? I was so absorbed in the work that I almost forgot about the gala itself. Until the evening it was happening, when my phone started buzzing with social media notifications. Friends and acquaintances were posting photos from my parents' backyard, the same backyard where I'd played as a child, where I'd gotten married, where I'd been unofficially banished. The photos stung more than I'd expected. My sister looked radiant, in a navy blue gown I'd helped her pick out last year. My parents stood with the mayor and several prominent donors, my father's hand on my mother's back in the gesture of quiet possession that had always made their marriage seem so solid. But what struck me most was how normal it all looked, how easily they'd erased me from their perfect picture. The gala was proceeding exactly as it always had, with the same elegance, the same important guests, the same satisfied smiles. I'd been so integral to its success for so many years, yet my absence hadn't created even a ripple in their carefully orchestrated evening. I was about to close the social media app when a notification caught my attention. Someone had tagged me in a post from the gala. My heart raced as I clicked on it, expecting to see some cruel joke or uncomfortable question about why I wasn't there. Instead, I found a post from Jennifer Walsh, the gala's professional event coordinator, someone I'd worked with for the past 3 years, but had never considered a friend. The post was a photo of a beautifully arranged display of children's books, with a sign that read, "Books for Tomorrow Community Initiative, supporting tonight's mission." The caption made my breath catch. Inspired by the incredible grassroots fundraising happening in our community right now. Catherine Harrison's Books for Tomorrow initiative has already raised over $20,000 for the same literacy programs we're supporting tonight. Real change happens when people stop waiting for invitations and start creating their own opportunities. Community over gala. Books for tomorrow. I stared at my phone, reading the post again and again. Jennifer had somehow learned about my fundraising effort and had brought it into the gala itself. In the comments, I could see surprised reactions from people I'd known for years. Catherine Harrison? Why isn't she here tonight? Wait, she's been fundraising separately? How much has she raised? I had no idea. This is amazing. My phone rang. It was Jennifer. Catherine, I hope you don't mind what I posted. I heard about your initiative from David Chen, and I couldn't help but share it. What you've accomplished in just 3 weeks is extraordinary. Thank you. I'm not sure what to say. Can I ask you something? Would you be willing to let me announce your fundraising total during tonight's program? The cause is the same, and honestly, what you've done should be recognized. My first instinct was to say no, to keep my small victory private and separate from my parents' event. But then I thought about all the children who would benefit from the money I'd raised, about the teachers who'd shared my website, about the small business owners who'd believed in the mission enough to contribute. Yes, I said. But please, just focus on the cause. This isn't about me. Of course. Thank you, Catherine. You've reminded me why I got into this work in the first place. After she hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the donation records and thank you letters I'd been organizing. Through my window, I could see the distant glow of lights from my parents' house, where their gala was reaching its peak. For the first time in weeks, I felt peaceful about it all. An hour later, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Video clips from the gala began appearing on social media, tagged with my name. My hands shook as I clicked on the first one. Jennifer stood at the podium, elegant in a black evening gown, addressing the crowd with the confident smile of someone who knew she was about to surprise everyone. Before we announce tonight's fundraising total, she was saying, I want to share something that's been happening in our community over the past few weeks. A grassroots initiative that exemplifies the true spirit of giving. The camera panned across the audience, and I could see my parents at their table, my father's brow furrowed in confusion, my mother's hand frozen halfway to her wine glass. 3 weeks ago, someone in our community decided that waiting for an invitation wasn't necessary when children needed books. Someone organized their own fundraising effort, reaching out to local businesses and individual donors, creating a network of support that put 100% of contributions directly into literacy programs. The murmur in the crowd was audible, even through my phone's speaker. That someone is Catherine Harrison, and her Books for Tomorrow initiative has raised $22,000 in just 3 weeks. The applause that followed was thunderous. I watched, mesmerized, as the camera caught my parents' faces. My mother's mouth was slightly open, her carefully applied lipstick suddenly looking stark against her pale face. My father was staring at the podium as if Jennifer had just announced that gravity had been repealed. Catherine couldn't be with us tonight, Jennifer continued, and I felt a flush of gratitude for her diplomatic phrasing. But her commitment to our shared mission deserves recognition. In fact, her independent effort has raised nearly as much as our traditional gala format, with a fraction of the overhead costs. More applause, and this time I could see people at various tables turning to look at my parents, some with curiosity, others with what looked like concern. The camera caught my sister Sarah leaning over to whisper urgently in my mother's ear. So let's give a round of applause for Catherine Harrison and everyone who contributed to Books for Tomorrow. You've shown us that the most powerful fundraising happens when people are driven by pure passion for a cause. The applause continued, and I found myself crying. Not from sadness this time, but from a relief so profound, it felt like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. My phone rang immediately. It was my mother, Catherine. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Do we? That woman, at the gala. She announced, How did she know about your fundraising? I could hear the gala continuing in the background, the sound of conversation and clinking glasses that had once been the soundtrack to my happiest childhood memories. Because I've been working, Mom. I've been doing exactly what you taught me to do. Caring about something bigger than myself, and taking action to make a difference. But why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you coordinate with the foundation? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. You uninvited me from your gala because I was bad for your family image. Why would I coordinate with you? Silence. Then, very quietly, we never said you were bad for our image. You didn't have to say it, Mom. You said it when you erased my name from the invitation. You said it when you decided I was too complicated to include. You said it when you chose your reputation over your daughter. Catherine, that's not... I have to go, Mom. I have thank you notes to write to people who believed in me when my own family didn't. I hung up before she could respond, something I was getting surprisingly good at. Over the next few days, the story took on a life of its own. Local news picked up on the parallel fundraising story, framing it as an inspiring tale of grassroots activism. The attention made me uncomfortable, but it also brought in more donations and volunteers for Books for Tomorrow. What surprised me most was how many people reached out to share their own stories of family exclusion, of times when they'd been made to feel like they didn't belong in their own lives. My initiative had apparently struck a nerve that went far beyond literacy programs. My parents didn't call again for a week. When my father finally reached out, his voice was different, quieter, less certain. Catherine, I think we made a mistake. Was in the middle of organizing a book distribution event at the elementary school, surrounded by volunteers and stacks of new books purchased with our donations. The simple joy of seeing children's faces light up when they got to choose their own books to take home had become my new definition of success. Did you? We were trying to protect the foundation's reputation. The divorce, the financial changes. We thought it would be easier if you pretended I didn't exist. If we kept things simple for 1 year, just until things settled down. I watched a 7-year-old girl carefully select a book about butterflies, her face serious with the weight of such an important decision. Dad, I raised $22,000 in 3 weeks with no family name, no fancy venue, no catered dinner. I did it with phone calls and passion, and people who believed in the cause. What does that tell you about what really matters? It tells me we underestimated you. No, Dad. You forgot me. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long moment. How do we fix this? I thought about the question while I helped the little girl with the butterfly book write her name on the inside cover. How do you fix 28 years of conditional love? How do you repair the damage done when someone realizes their worth isn't tied to their family's approval? I don't know if you can, I said finally. But I'm not waiting around to find out. The Books for Tomorrow initiative continued to grow. What had started as a response to rejection became something much larger, a sustainable model for community-driven fundraising that other cities began to replicate. I left my nonprofit job to run it full-time, funded by a small percentage of the donations that covered my modest salary. 6 months later, I received an invitation to speak at the National Literacy Foundation's annual conference. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of educators, librarians, and philanthropists, I thought about the girl I'd been just months before, the one who'd needed her parents' permission to feel valuable, who'd measured her worth by her inclusion in their world. The most important lesson I've learned, I told the audience, is that exclusion can be a gift if you're brave enough to unwrap it. When someone tells you that you don't belong, they're giving you permission to create your own belonging. When they say you're not invited, they're freeing you to extend your own invitations. After my speech, a woman approached me, someone I recognized from the audience at my parents' gala, though we'd never been introduced. I was there that night, she said, when Jennifer announced your fundraising total. I've never seen anything like the look on your parents' faces. Oh, it wasn't Embarrassment, she continued. It was recognition, like they suddenly realized who you really were. I smiled, thinking about the person I'd become in the months since that devastating phone call. I hope so, but honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. I know who I am now, and that's enough. My parents and I have found a careful peace. We have lunch occasionally, conversations that dance around the deeper hurts, but acknowledge the love that survived them. They've donated to Books for Tomorrow, quietly and without fanfare. My mother sometimes volunteers at our book distribution events, and I've caught her watching me with something that looks like pride mixed with surprise. Sarah and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly. She admitted, months later, that she'd been relieved when I was excluded from the gala, because it meant she didn't have to choose sides. Now she serves on the Books for Tomorrow advisory board and tells people, with genuine admiration, about what her sister accomplished when she stopped waiting for permission. The Harrison Family Foundation still holds their annual gala. It's smaller, now more focused, with less emphasis on social status and more on actual impact. They've adopted some of the grassroots strategies I developed, and Jennifer Walsh now coordinates both events, their traditional gala and our community-driven initiatives. I've been invited to this year's gala. The invitation came with a handwritten note from my mother. We'd be honored to have you as our guest and our inspiration. I haven't decided whether to attend. The girl who was devastated by exclusion would go, desperate to reclaim her place at the table. But the woman I've become understands that the most powerful place to sit is at a table you've built yourself, surrounded by people who chose to join you not because they had to, but because they believed in what you were creating. Last week, I received a letter from a teacher in Ohio who'd heard about Books for Tomorrow and started a similar program in her district. She'd raised $8,000 in 2 months and wanted advice on expanding to neighboring schools. You probably don't remember me, she wrote. But I was at the National Literacy Conference when you spoke. You said that exclusion could be a gift. I want you to know that your gift has become my gift, and now it's becoming a gift for hundreds of children who will grow up believing that they belong wherever they decide to show up. I keep that letter on my desk, next to the cream-colored invitation to my parents' gala. Both represent invitations. One to return to a world that had excluded me, the other to continue building a world where exclusion isn't possible, because everyone has the power to create their own belonging. I've learned that the most meaningful invitations aren't the ones we receive, but the ones we extend to ourselves. My parents taught me to wait for permission, but life taught me to grant it. They showed me how to be grateful for inclusion, but I discovered how to be grateful for the strength that comes from standing alone until you find the people who choose to stand with you. The gala invitation still sits on my desk, unanswered. But every day I wake up and extend a new invitation to myself, to continue building something that matters, to keep creating spaces where people belong, not because of their last name or their social status, but because of their passion and their willingness to act on it. And every day, I accept that invitation with the quiet confidence of someone who learned that the most exclusive event you can attend is the one where you finally meet the person you were always meant to become. They deleted my name from their guest list, but they couldn't delete me from my own story.